All right, so as we stated on Tuesday, today's class session is all about just getting folks' questions answered for the final exam. We can go back over stuff if you missed a day or I didn't explain something super well and it's just a little bit fuzzy still. And we can come up with some practice questions for the final if that helps folks prepare and know what to study for. Our exam again is when? Everybody remember?
That's next Wednesday.
8.
Tuesday. 8.
Early in the morning. Yeah. Set those alarms.
Wednesday? Yeah, that was Tuesday.
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Oh.
That's a good catch, right? So, Tuesday at 0800 or 8:30.
I think it's over.
Yeah. All right.
I'm gonna check.
Good. The exam calendar and schedule is always at registrar.siu.edu under the academic calendars link, and that'll get you where you need to go. So, what questions do you guys and gals have? This is totally just that kind of a class session. So once you are satisfied that you've got everything that you need, you're clear for takeoff, and we'll see you for the final exam. And yeah, it's been a good semester. I feel like we've covered some good ground. We've laughed, we've cried, shared Gifford Pinchot stories. Regrettably, he died, but that rhymed. Wow. Anyway, it's been a good semester. I appreciate you guys. So, what questions do you have?
Is there still time to submit extra credit if we want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so I'm pretty easygoing on timing for extra credit. Pretty much get it to me by like the final exam. We can grade stuff all throughout next week, but the week gets busier as exams start piling up and stuff like that. So earlier in the week, it's better to catch your profs in a good mood. Award lots of extra credit. No, I'll give you the same either way, but
That format is just like a report about
yeah, pretty much a trip report, or like volunteering in Crab Orchard or something like that. Throw me a couple of pictures, describe what worked all right, what didn't work all right with the trip, and that's good enough. And I'm pretty confident that you guys are going to see a lot of the stuff that we talk about when you get out there and start doing anything, whatever it is. So getting out there and doing that stuff for a class like this where we don't have space for a field trip and stuff like that is really valuable. So I'm going to try and incentivize that and reward it as much as possible. Cool. All right, so any questions?
So I just got here.
8 a.m. on Tuesday. Right here. And it'll be a gamified format. So come, get all the points you'd like to get over the finish line, and then good to go. Yeah.
So are all the recordings on like your YouTube? Is that where they're all at?
Most of them are. The last couple of weeks are not uploaded yet, but I just got to sit down and do it.
Where
And
can I find your YouTube again?
yeah, sure. Let's look that up. I should know my own URL, but I'm old and tired, and all right. Let's see. View my channel. All right, this is youtube.com/ @ Logan Park 2530. And then from there, that just brings up any old YouTube channel, and you can navigate more directly to the. If you go to the playlists, there will be a playlist on Intro to Forest Rec Management. The forestry playlist has all of them. That's over 500 videos, probably overkill. Intro to Forest Rec Management Forestry 220 has 55 so far and probably another dozen to add. So it probably has a few from like last year when I started doing screen recordings and stuff like that. But most of it's going to be this year's stuff, and they're more or less in order-ish, kind of, sort of, not really. But yeah, I try to give each one a descriptive title so you can get right to the video that you're looking for. And then put it on 2x speed and just read the transcript so you don't have to listen to me again. Nice. Efficiency, right? Cool. One of these days I'm going to prank everybody and like auto-tune my voice in the video. Just see if anybody notices. Yeah, most of the videos have like 0 to 1 view, so that's fine. It's fine. So, what other questions you got?
Oh yeah. So part of the class was talking about organizations and things. Like, how do you want us to study that part?
Sure, yeah. So, we can kind of think about the class semester as broken down into 3 sort of major functional sections. That is, we had like introduction and definitions, so terms, and then we had kind of a meandering stroll through the mosaic of landscape management and forestry in the United States, and that's where we have all these different organizations. So it's just trying to sort out, mostly for freshmen and sophomores, hey, we have different chunks of the executive third of our government, and Department of Agriculture has the Forest Service, Department of Interior has the Park Service, and because those are different organizations with different goals, it's kind of weird and janky to hear anybody talking about Shawnee National Park, right? That's a very different animal than Shawnee National Forest actually is. So let's try to help folks clear up, where do we kind of sort and file all this stuff?
So, like, for example, the history, you didn't want us to memorize dates. Do you want us to memorize specific organizations or not? Or do you want more of what?
Yeah, so think about memorizing or studying up on how these organizations are significantly different from each other. They're not all the same thing. They're not wired to be the same thing. They're not meant to be the same thing. So what are the distinctives of the United States Forest Service versus the National Park Service? Like, if one interesting hypothetical might be, if we turned Shawnee National Forest into a national park and ran it under the Park Service instead of, as currently, under the Forest Service, how would it be completely different for somebody showing up for a hunting trip? Well, most national parks don't allow hunting, so it would be pretty different for hunters. What I don't want folks to focus on with the mosaic or the organizations side of things is kind of the same level of information as not worrying about dates on legislation. So I don't care about you guys memorizing down to a significant digit how many hundreds of millions of recreation visits the National Park Service hosts every year versus how many the United States Forest Service hosts, right? It's hundreds of millions for both of them, and at some point it's just a large number, right? It's just a meaninglessly large number. So I don't care about memorizing factoids like that. I am interested in sort of seeing, do you understand how things are generally arranged across Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, and then some of those ancillary organizations we talked about, like Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Land Management, which is a huge deal for forestry jobs out west, but we just don't have any BLM stuff here in the Midwest based on how our country came to do the Western model of resource management. So, the third part of the class was history, trends, near future stuff. Right. So, back to ancient times and very prehistoric times and then forward to today and very near future, as we talked about on Tuesday. Is that gonna answer the question on that?
I think, sort of, yeah.
Okay, cool. So, one example question on the exam. Let's just pick one up here. One example question on the final exam that probes the land management mosaic question might be something like, Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge is managed by what agency? Right, we're doing question style formats, so, right, is this a Park Service website? Is it Forest Service? Is it Bureau of Land Management? Is it somebody else?
Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, right? So it's not designed to be a trick question. It's just designed to help me understand how you understand a national forest is very different than a wildlife refuge. Even though here in Southern Illinois, we have a national wildlife refuge physically touching a national forest on miles of border, right? So that's an important distinction. They do management pretty differently, and they do a bunch of stuff sort of collaboratively, but to accomplish their own ends. So there you go. Remember, we also talked about state and local public institutions and organizations. We talked about for-profit, commercial, forest recreation management stuff. We talked about not-for-profit organizations like World Wildlife Fund or Nature Conservancy, other big multinational or transnational NGOs, non-governmental organizations. If you do end up working with any public organization, get ready for lots of TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. NGOs, NSA, CIA, FBI, lots of 3-letter acronyms. All right. Cool. Other questions? What do you got? You had something?
How relevant is the final exam sample that's posted on D2L?
Not very. That's a different format. Well, the content's might be the same. You're certainly welcome to read through it and study off that, yeah, for sure. But yeah, we're gonna have kind of that game show format instead of like the multiple choice, all that stuff. Good question. I totally forgot that was there. But yeah, use it. Yeah. I mean, people pass around old exams, right? So it's gonna happen. It was only awkward when I was on a group chat with a bunch of students and they were sharing around exams. I was like, guys, Luckily, did you know you can delete old messages out of a thread? Yeah, that's very important. Anyway, moving on. Other questions about the final exam? Yeah.
Given that we don't have a whole lot of outside class assignments, what kind of components will factor into our final grading class? Is it mainly
Yeah, sure.
based on the final? Or?
Participation, we haven't really done many quizzes. The final exam and towards the very beginning of the semester, we had a couple of super short in-class exercises, just like easy conversational stuff. So just go ahead and give everybody credit on those things, and then the final exam plus that. What else? Moving on. Right? We've had a couple of pretty serious conversations about how this is a non-trivial thing, right? They get millions of people to overnight change where folks are going in protected areas to try and find imaginary digital monsters. Although they're real to some of us, okay? And that means something for you as a park ranger when you're out there and you have people walking off cliffs in your park just on accident, right? So we want to think about changes in digital trends, how your smartphone is incentivizing you to capture videos of other people, hopefully doing stupid and sometimes dangerous stuff in the wild. So we talked about the curse of the cell phone video and clout chasing and all this stuff. All right, how about this one? It's good. Remember how the Nature Conservancy was discussed in class relative to forestry, resource management, land management, landscape management, partnership management with the National Park Service? So, 1980s and forward, organizations like Nature Conservancy are taking a much more active role and a public-centered role on being co-managers instead of just pass-through organizations. Cool. All right. Is anybody not totally tracking with these so far? Cool. All right. Does anybody remember the story of how we got on this crazy hype train of national parks?
Lewisham Park had the undersell Yellowstone. We're like, yeah, you don't want to
Totally.
set that aside.
And they joined a long and proud American tradition of lying through their teeth to Congress. Now, they had a lot of other good stuff come out of that expedition, like a lot of good stuff, but that one was totally a very, very soft undersell of what useless land was the literal phrase that they used. Yellowstone was, and let's just, let's throw this trash tier, these trash mobs of a national park into a national park designation and, kind of save the ranchers from making an economic blunder in this worthless place.
Wasn't it originally just like a square on the map?
Still is.
And then other organizations managed land around it.
Yeah.
Greater Yellowstone. Greater Yellowstone.
Ecosystem. Yes, you got it. Not to be confused with GYAT. The Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem is a big square on the map, which has nothing to do with the ecology of the Yellowstone Plateau. Just absolutely nothing. These guys had no idea what they were doing in the 1860s and 1870s when this conversation was getting started. And so, years, decades, parts of a century later, we finally have a functional national park system and a service to curate these places, as well as a United States Forest Service, again in a totally different branch of the executive chunk of our government. And the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem now manages that entire sort of huge region of the Mountain West part of the United States as a unified ecosystem. So they went back in after a lot of these places were designated and pulled out like a couple of 1,000 miles of barbed wire. So in the late 1800s, the open range was still partly open, and we were busy fencing it off and turning it into like the Kansas territory and stuff like that. And the bison were piling up by the thousands, the tens of thousands, in like the corners of these fenced off areas, which used to be open range. And then because they couldn't move out of over winter storms and stuff like that, they'd freeze standing in groups of tens of thousands of bison or cattle. And that was one of the first wake-up calls of, gosh, we are not, like, we can totally tame and conquer and fence all this stuff off, but maybe that's not super wise. So yeah, we get the greater Yellowstone ecosystem as a response, and it is off to the races from there. And now, this is a really nice place to visit. And reasonably ecologically functional. Because they're managing it as the ecosystem, not as the square parcel. Cool. Alright, what about, let's see here. ICEs. In our history and technology section, we talked a little bit about the effects of ATVs and UHVs and OHVs and off-road motorcycles, dirt bikes, high clearance four-wheel drive. Is everybody familiar with what basically the introduction of internal combustion engines in an off-road capacity have meant for United States forestry and park management in the last about 75 years, post-World War II? It's good. All right, cool. What else? Real blast from the past. Who or what is a concession? This is from like our first week of class.
Like a private business.
It's a private business that runs inside a public place by contract, by permit. So if you go to Grand Canyon or you go to Yellowstone or any of these places, when you go and stay at a lodge on site, it's run not by the National Park Service or the Forest Service, whoever the agency is on site. It's run by a private company because the federal government doesn't want to be in competition with American businesses. Does that make sense? All right, so this is like an ironclad thing. This is why the military doesn't build its own jets and bombs, beans, bandages, and bullets. It pays American